So, and understanding comics, of course, was so was so important because it was the first comic about comics, and I think even after Will Eisner, comics and sequential art, the first attempt to put up kind of an aesthetic theory of comics. Is that what you would say? So
yeah, there have been others certainly studying comics, but it was definitely that moment where I took comics as an art form and said, you know what, clear away history. That was the big thing, was that I said, let's pretend there had never been any comics history for just a second and think, what is this? What is this? Is all we're doing is we put one picture after another to tell a story. It's an art form. What are the boundaries of that art form? What can that art form do? What would it be like if we just forgot about superheroes and funny animals and ducks for just a little while and just thought about it as a blank page? And it was a way of kind of, like you know, a chalkboard, like a blackboard. This is my way of erasing the blackboard and just saying comics equals picture plus picture time, you know? And then what does that mean? What does it lead to?
Mm-hmm. So we come back to time.
Yeah, always.
Because the graphic novel deals with time all the time and
yes.
temporality. So and then the second one was this one, reinventing comics from 2000, comics neue Erfinden, which suits better as far as I'm concerned. So what was that about?
Well, this is about different revolutions for changing the way comics could be, and many of them have actually come true. Things like more gender balance, more women making and reading comics, or comics being better literature or better art. But then the second half was all about computers. It was about the distribution of comics on the web. It was about the possibilities for digital comics. And it was about making comics digitally. And some of those predictions came true. Some of them are still, hopefully, maybe someday coming true. Some of them, maybe I was a little off. A lot of people didn't like the second book as much. I call it my troubled middle child. You know,
the sandwich existence.
Yeah, it has issues, but I still believe in a lot of the messages.
I think the main thesis at the end of the book was that comics will be freed from the physicality of books within the next 10 years. So it was like, when was it? 2000, now we have 2015. And you came up with that. You have to talk about it.
Oh, yes.
I think there is a lot to be explained in the light of reinventing comics about that in graphic novel, whatever that may mean. And then the third one, of course, was making comics machen, 2006, I think, in Germany, 2007. And what was the difference to understanding comics?
Well, you know, Making Comics is the book they all thought I was working on the first time. Because when I first did Understanding Comics, they would say, so is it like a how to draw comics? And I would say, no. And that was always their first guess. This time, yes, it's how to draw comics, but also how to construct comics. How are comics made on a structural level? There are maybe hundreds, even thousands of books in the U.S. on how to draw in a particular way.
How to draw the Marvel way.
Yeah, how to draw the Marvel way, which is actually a pretty good book in its way. But then there were lots of books about how to draw sexy Japanese schoolgirls. And everything seemed to be about how to make a particular kind of picture. And I felt that what we really desperately needed was a book about how comics work at a fundamental level, at a structural level. What kind of choices do people make when they tell stories and pictures? And people really wanted a book of that kind. Ivy, my wife Ivy is right there. She's with her hands up. Ivy was at a bookstore, and I think you heard 2 conversations like this, where a parent was looking for a book for their child on how to make comics, and they were. And the bookseller said, well, we have this book about how to draw this kind of thing. And she said, well, no, that's not exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something like how comics are made. How do you make comics, not just how to draw it one way. And so I made that book, that missing book. There was a missing book out there.
And so then you did everything everybody can have a dream of becoming a comics theoretician or a comics analyzer, then you turn back to art.
Yeah.
Is it that way? And so perhaps now we have, of course, everybody's bought one. We have this beautiful book, The Sculptor, the Bildhauer, and perhaps it might be. Can you give us a short idea of what's happening in the book so we get started then?
Yeah. Is it we'd say Der Bildhauer? Did I do that okay? Der. All right. Let's work on this. Der. Bildhauer.
Very good.
Yeah. I know, he'll never get it completely. But this is about a young man. He's young, he's only 26, but he has a little bit of success as a sculptor when he's very young. And then he loses it all. He's bitter, he's washed up, he thinks his life is over. He's 26. He's a little...
That's what we all think when 26.
I think a lot of 26-year-olds feel this way. He can't sell any sculptures. It's over for him when suddenly along comes his old granduncle Harry in a diner and talks to him about his dreams, his desires, and David spills his guts. He explains all the reasons why he's frustrated with his art until he realizes that his granduncle Harry is dead, and he's talking to a dead man, and this is death come to him to offer him a deal that David can sculpt anything he wants with his bare hands, but he only has 200 days to live. And David, being young and impulsive and maybe a little bit foolish, takes the deal. And then he inconveniently meets the love of his life. And instead of the question of what to make with this power, he has to make the choices of how to spend the minutes that he has left. And this is a story about his remaining minutes. This is a story about what he does with the rest of his life. And even though he only has 200 days, I took 5 years to make it, and I gave him 500 luxurious pages to expire in. And it's that romance that's at the heart of the story. And is, much of it is about that romance. It's about, how do you spend your days?
It's a beautiful book.
Thank you.
There's only one thing I was puzzled. We talked about it earlier. you have to explain, because it's the German premiere of the book, and there's only one really mean guy in the book. Of course, it's an art critic, and it's
so great.
And it's an art critic with a German name.
Yes.
Brecht Becker. What did you think about?
Well, first I chose Brecht because one of the problems of my protagonist, one of his fatal flaws, is he has what his friend calls an irony deficiency. And somehow I feel like Brecht represents, at least for me, maybe some of that detachment. I'm not a Brecht scholar or anything, but some of that ironic detachment that characterizes the modern age. Now, why German name? Here's the problem. The story takes place in New York. I have 2 leads, male, female, Jewish, one's half Jewish. The Jewish thing doesn't figure into it, I promise. And then I have the character of dead Uncle Harry, and then I have his friend from home, Ollie. We don't really know what his background is, but his family's lived in America for some time. Ollie's gay, he works in the gallery scene. Okay, now I have the supporting characters. And now it's time to do the right thing, Scott, and finally have a diverse cast. So, I have a character who's half black, half Puerto Rican. I have a character who's from India. Or actually, she's from Pakistan, but David thinks she's from India. It doesn't matter. Okay? I have a Russian landlord, and I felt bad about that because he's very mean. So I have another Russian. Yeah, he's very mean.
German Russian.
Right. So I have this. I have another Russian later on to sort of counterbalance this. Not all Russians. But I can't do that every time, right? And I have a half Japanese artist